The smell of vanilla and expensive leather, that was the first glitch in the simulation of my perfect life. I'm a logistics manager. My entire existence is built on the foundation of cold, hard data. I track shipping containers across oceans. I account for every liter of fuel and every minute of delay. In my world, things don't just happen. There is always a cause, a trajectory, and a destination. So, when I stepped into my hallway at 7:15 p.m. on a Tuesday and smelled a fragrance that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, my internal alarm didn't just beep, it screamed. We have a rule in this house: unscented everything. My skin reacts to cheap dyes and heavy perfumes like it's being attacked by a swarm of bees. Elena, my wife of 8 years, always joked that she married a man who smelled like fresh air and laundry soap. She was a landscape architect, a woman who dealt in soil, cedar mulch, and the honest scent of rain. But as I stood there dropping my laptop bag onto the hardwood floor, the air felt heavy, cloying, and synthetic. "Elena?" I called out. My voice sounded thin like a radio signal fading out. The humming from the kitchen stopped abruptly. It wasn't a casual, "oh, you're home" silence. It was the silence of a heart stopping. When she appeared in the doorway, she wasn't wearing her usual paint-stained leggings or her oversized work shirt. She was wrapped in a sapphire silk robe, the one I'd bought her for our 5th anniversary, the one she said was too nice for a regular Tuesday. "Mark, you're early," she said. Her smile was a masterpiece of architectural engineering, perfectly symmetrical and completely hollow. Her eyes did a frantic lap of the hallway, landing for a microsecond on the stairs before returning to me. "The meeting with the regional board? I thought you were locked in until 9. "Cancelled," I said, stepping closer. The smell was radiating off her now. It was masculine but sweet, the kind of scent worn by men who have never had grease under their fingernails. "What's that smell, Elle? It's giving me a headache already." She didn't flinch. She just laughed, that light, airy sound that used to make me feel like the luckiest man on earth, but now sounded like glass breaking. "Oh, it's a sample. One of the girls at the firm brought in these high-end French testers. I must have spilled some on my wrist. I'll go wash it off, I promise." She turned and headed for the bathroom, her silk robe fluttering behind her. As I walked past the hallway table toward the kitchen, my boot kicked something small and metallic. It skittered across the floor and hit the baseboard with a sharp clink. I bent down and picked it up. It was a cufflink. Heavy, sterling silver, engraved with the initials AV. I don't wear cufflinks. I wear flannel and work boots. I looked at the silver weight in my palm, and for the first time in my life, the world didn't make sense. The logistics were wrong. The timeline was broken. To understand why I didn't just scream right then, you have to understand who we were. Or who I thought we were. Elena and I met in a coffee shop 10 years ago. I was a junior analyst buried in spreadsheets. She was a student sketching garden layouts on napkins. We were the stable couple. Our friends envied us. While they were swiping through apps and crying over ghosting, we were building a life. I paid off her student loans when my first big bonus came through. She designed the backyard of my dreams. We had a golden retriever named Buster who worshipped the ground she walked on. I was the provider, the rock. She was the spark, the creative force. It was a perfect exchange of energy. Or so the story went. For the next week, I became a ghost in my own home. I didn't confront her. My training kicked in: observe, document, analyze. If I was wrong, a confrontation would destroy our marriage. If I was right, a confrontation would give her the chance to hide the evidence. I started a file on my work computer, hidden deep within a nested folder of shipping manifests for a defunct Estonian freighter. I called it Project Zero. The inconsistencies began to pile up like cargo at a congested port. Working late at the park site, she'd text at 6 p.m. I checked the weather app. The site was 20 miles away and it was pouring rain. No landscape architect works in a mud pit in a thunderstorm at night. Dinner with the city council members, she'd say at 8 p.m. I'd look at our joint credit card statement. There were no charges for gas, no Uber receipts. But when I checked her personal savings account, which we kept separate, a sign of modern trust, I saw a pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork, there was an ATM withdrawal of $500. Always from the same branch in the North End, a neighborhood we never visited. $1,000 a week. $4,000 a month. That's $48,000 a year being sucked out of her life in untraceable cash. The realization hit me while I was sitting in my car in the company parking lot, staring at a spreadsheet of her withdrawals. She wasn't just having an affair. She was funding a relocation. Or she was being extorted. Or most likely she was building a life raft to sail away from me. The AV on the cufflink haunted me. I spent my lunch breaks scouring LinkedIn, local news, and municipal records. It didn't take long. Arthur Vane. The name appeared in a press release for the Green Horizons City Park project, the very project Elena was leading. Vane was a high-stakes real estate developer, the kind of man who wore $5,000 suits and looked at the world as something to be paved over for profit. He was 45, divorced twice, and had a reputation for aggressive acquisitions. The pieces clicked together with a sickening mechanical thud. She wasn't just sleeping with a man, she was sleeping with her boss's biggest client. The psychological toll of playing the happy husband was immense. I'd come home, kiss her cheek, and ask how the willow tree placement was going, all while knowing that she had probably spent the afternoon in a penthouse suite in the North End. I felt like a stranger in my own skin. Every time she touched my hand, I felt a jolt of electricity, not the good kind but the kind that comes from a faulty wire. I needed proof that would hold up in a cold, hard courtroom. Not just for the divorce but for my own sanity. I needed to see the lie with my own eyes. I called an old friend from the industry, a guy named Marcus who specialized in asset protection. He was essentially a private investigator with a degree in forensic accounting. "Mark, buddy, it's been a while," Marcus said, his voice gravelly and calm. "What's the logistics problem today?" "I need a shadow, Marcus," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I need someone to follow my wife. I need photos, I need locations, and most importantly, I need to know where the money is going." "The North End withdrawals?" Marcus asked after I gave him the brief. "That's not just a mistress fund, Mark. That's a kickback. If she's working for Vane and taking cash on the side, she's not just cheating on you. She's committing professional suicide. And if you're married to her, she's dragging you into the blast zone." That was the moment the grief died and the survival instinct took over. This wasn't just a broken heart anymore. This was a tactical threat to my entire future. Marcus didn't waste time. 2 nights later he sent me a link to a private cloud folder. I opened it at 2 a.m., sitting in the dark of my home office while Elena slept soundly in the next room. The blue light of the monitor felt like a surgical laser. There were 6 photos. Photo 1. Elena's car parked in the underground garage of the Vane Towers. Photo 2. Elena and Arthur Vane standing on a balcony. He had his hand on the small of her back. She was laughing, that same glass-breaking laugh. Photo 3. The handoff. A manila envelope passing from his hand to hers. But it was photo 4 that broke me. It wasn't a photo of them together. It was a photo of a document Marcus had managed to snap through the window of her car while she was in a coffee shop. It was a lease agreement. For a luxury apartment in Chicago. Only her name was on it. The start date was January 1st. 6 weeks away. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning to vanish. She was going to wait until after the holidays, wait until the Green Horizon project was finalized, and then she was going to leave me with an empty house and a mountain of questions. I sat there, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I looked at the cufflink, which I still kept in my pocket like a jagged coin. My mind raced through the logistics. If she moved to Chicago, she'd take her half of the house equity. She'd take the dog. She'd take the furniture I'd helped her pick out. She'd take the life we built and use it as fuel for her new one with Vane. I felt a surge of cold, focused adrenaline. Most men would have stormed into the bedroom, woken her up, and started the screaming match of the century. They would have thrown the pictures in her face and demanded an explanation. But I'm a logistics manager. I know that if you interrupt a shipment mid-transit, you lose the cargo. You have to let the process play out until the moment of maximum leverage. I closed the laptop. I took a deep breath, smelling the faint, lingering scent of her unscented laundry detergent on my own shirt. "Okay, Elena," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to play the ghost? Let's see who's better at haunting." The next morning I was the perfect husband. I made her favorite pour-over coffee. I kissed her forehead before she left for the site. "Have a great day, honey," I said, my voice steady. "Don't work too hard. Remember, we have that dinner with the Millers on Friday." "I won't forget," she chirped, her eyes bright with the excitement of her secret life. "I love you." "Love you too," I lied. The words felt like ash in my mouth. As soon as her car cleared the driveway, I didn't go to work. I went to the bank. Not our joint bank, my personal one. I met with a financial advisor and started the process of segregating assets. I didn't move her money, that would be a red flag. Instead, I began documenting every cent I had contributed to the house, the renovations, and her business. I then went to see a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a shark named Sarah who specialized in high-asset divorces and white-collar crime. I laid the photos and the cufflink on her desk. She's taking kickbacks from a developer, I told her. She's funneling it into a private account. She signed a lease in another state. I want to make sure that when she leaves with exactly what she brought into this marriage. Nothing. Sarah looked at the photos, then at me. You're very calm, Mark. Most people in your position are vibrating with rage. Rage is a waste of energy, I said. Rage doesn't win a settlement. Logistics win a settlement. Sarah smiled. It was a predatory, cold smile. I like you. Here's what we're going to do. We're not going to serve her. Not yet. We're going to let her think she's winning. We're going to let her move more of those kickbacks. The more she steals, the more leverage we have. We're going to build a cage so tight she won't even realize she's inside it until I turn the key. I walked out of the office into the bright November sun. The world looked different now. The trees were bare, the air was sharp, and the perfect life I had lived for 8 years was revealed for what it was. A beautifully landscaped garden built over a toxic landfill. I headed to the pet store. I bought Buster a new high-end tracking collar, one with a GPS chip. I told myself it was for his safety, but I knew the truth. In the coming war, everything I loved was a potential casualty, and I was going to protect my dog even if I couldn't protect my heart. That evening, when Elena came home, she found me in the backyard raking leaves. You're home early again, she said, a hint of suspicion finally creeping into her voice. Just missed you, I said, leaning on the rake. I looked at the garden she had designed, the stone paths, the carefully curated perennials. It was a work of art. And like all art, it was an illusion. I was just thinking about the spring, about what we should plant next. She smiled, oblivious to the fact that for her, there would be no spring in this garden. I have some ideas, she said. I bet you do, I replied. I went inside and started dinner. I chopped vegetables with precision. I timed the steak to the second. I was the perfect husband, the perfect provider, the perfect fool. But as I watched her sip her wine, I wasn't seeing my wife. I was seeing a series of data points. I was seeing the $500 withdrawals. I was seeing the AV on the cufflink. I was seeing the lease in Chicago. I was waiting for the final piece of the puzzle. And I knew exactly where to find it. The coldness of my heart matched the November frost on the windows. For the next 3 weeks, I existed in a state of dual consciousness. To Elena, I was the same Mark. Reliable, a bit predictable, the man who remembered to pick up her favorite almond milk and always made sure her tires were inflated. But inside, I was a silent predator, recording every movement, every whisper, and every digital footprint she left behind. The second twist didn't come from a hidden photo or a GPS tracker. It came from my own mailbox. I was sorting through the mail on a Thursday, usually just utility bills and junk flyers, when I saw an envelope from the Internal Revenue Service. It wasn't addressed to Mark and Elena. It was addressed to me personally. Inside was a notice of an audit regarding a consulting firm registered at our home address. Logistics and Design Solutions LLC. I stared at the paper. I had never opened a consulting firm. I was a salaried employee at a global shipping company. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I scanned the document. According to the filing, I was the sole owner, and the firm had reported a loss of $120,000 in operational expenses over the last fiscal year, expenses that had been used to offset my personal income tax. She hadn't just been stealing, she had been identity theft laundering. She had set up a shell company in my name, forged my signature on the incorporation papers, and was using it to lose the kickback money she was getting from Arthur Vane. If the IRS came knocking, she would be clean, and I would be the one facing tax evasion and fraud charges. I didn't go home that night. I drove straight to Marcus's office, a converted garage filled with servers and coffee dregs. She's framing me, Marcus, I said, throwing the IRS letter on his desk. She's not just leaving. She's making sure I'm too busy dealing with federal charges to come after her for the money she's stashing in Chicago. Marcus looked at the papers, his brow furrowed. This is high-level stuff, Mark. She didn't do this alone. A landscape architect doesn't know how to set up a pass-through entity with this kind of sophistication. Vane? I spat. He's a developer. He does this for breakfast. Probably, Marcus agreed. But look at the signature on the LLC filing. He zoomed in on a high-res scan he'd pulled from the state registry. It's a good forgery. But look at the slant of them. It's too consistent. It's a digital stamp. He tapped a few keys, his eyes reflecting the glow of the monitors. I did some digging into your home network. Someone accessed your digital signature file on your desktop 3 months ago. At 2 a.m. While you were asleep. The betrayal felt like a physical weight in my lungs. She had sat in our office, feet away from our bed, and digitally signed my financial death warrant. I need to hit back, I said. Now. Wait, Marcus said, a slow smile spreading across his face. If she's using your name for the LLC, that means you legally own the accounts associated with it. You are the sole member. Have you checked the balance? My heart leaped. In her arrogance, she had used my legal identity to shield herself, thinking I was too logistics-brained to ever look beyond my spreadsheets. Marcus, can you find the bank? Already did. It's a boutique private bank downtown. She's been routing the Vane consulting fees through there. There's currently $215,000 sitting in that account, Mark. Legally it's yours. She can't report it stolen without admitting she committed identity theft to put it there. The irony was delicious. She was building her life raft with my name on the hull. I spent the next week working with Sarah, my lawyer. We didn't just document the affair anymore, we documented the fraud. I went to the boutique bank with the IRS letter and my ID. The teller was polite, oblivious to the war I was waging. I didn't close the account, that would alert her. Instead, I changed the contact email and the physical mailing address to a P.O. box I'd opened. Then I set up a sweep function. Every time a deposit over $1,000 hit that account, 90% of it was automatically transferred to a high-yield trust account Sarah had set up for me in a different state. I was literally draining her future while she sat across from me at dinner, talking about her stressful meetings. The tension in the house was becoming unbearable. I had to be a world-class actor. One night, she came home later than usual, smelling of that same leather and vanilla. She looked disheveled but triumphant. The park project got the final green light today, she said, pouring herself a massive glass of red wine. The city signed off on everything. Arthur. Mr. Vane is thrilled. That's amazing, honey, I said, not looking up from my book. Does that mean your workload will lighten up? Actually, she said, sitting down across from me, her eyes gleaming with a strange light. I might have to travel to Chicago for a few weeks in January. There's a sister project there. Huge opportunity. Chicago in January? Sounds cold, I remarked casually. But you should go for it. You've worked so hard. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her skin felt like ice. You're so supportive, Mark. I don't know what I'd do without you. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the predator beneath the silk. She was looking at me like I was a piece of old furniture she was about to leave on the curb. She didn't see a husband. She saw a fall guy. I'll always be here, Elle, I said. Right where you left me. The next twist happened 48 hours later. I was at work when my phone buzzed with an alert from the GPS tracker on her car. She wasn't at the Vane Towers. She wasn't at the park site. She was at a local dive bar on the outskirts of town, a place she would never go. I called Marcus. Where is she? She's meeting someone, Marcus said. But it's not Vane. I'm looking at the street cam feed now. It's a guy in a hoodie. Looks like a courier. A few minutes later, Marcus sent me a grainy photo. Elena was handing a flash drive to a man in a dark jacket. In exchange, he handed her a thick, padded envelope. What's in the envelope, Marcus? I can't be sure, but based on the size and the way she tucked it into her bag, I'd bet my career it's a fake passport and new ID documents. She's not just moving to Chicago, Mark. She's planning to disappear entirely. She's going to take the money, leave you with the IRS debt, and start over under a new name. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was a criminal escape. If she vanished before I served her, I'd be left holding the bag for $120,000 in tax fraud with no way to prove she was the one behind it. I have to move the timeline up, I told Sarah over the phone. Not yet, she cautioned. We need the link. We need to prove Vane is the one paying the consulting fees. If we get Vane, we get the leverage to keep her from running. Without Vane's money, she's just a woman with a fake passport and no resources. The link came from an unexpected source, Elena's own mother. Her mother, Diane, had always liked me more than her own daughter. She was a traditional woman who valued decency above all else. I invited her over for lunch while Elena was at the site. We sat in the garden Elena had designed, the one I now viewed as a graveyard of our marriage. Diane, I said, leaning forward. I'm worried about Elena. She's been acting different. She's been asking me to sign things I don't understand, and she's been using your name for some business filings. Did she tell you about the new firm? Diane's face paled. She set her teacup down with a rattle. My name? Mark, I haven't signed a business paper in 20 years. What is she doing? She's trying to protect herself, I think, I said, playing the concerned husband card one last time. But she might be in trouble with the developer, Arthur Vane. Do you know him? Diane's eyes filled with tears. She brought him to the house last month, Mark, when you were on that overnight trip to the warehouse. She told me he was an old friend from college. They were arguing in the kitchen about the final payment. He told her if she didn't get the records cleaned up, he'd make sure she never worked in this state again. There it was. The final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just a love affair, it was a mutual blackmail pact. Vane was using her to funnel bribes to city officials, and she was using him to fund her escape. They were two sharks circling each other, and I was the chum in the water. Diane, I said, taking her hand. I need you to do something for me. I need you to give me the login to your email. I know Elena uses it to send documents to her business partners because she thinks it's untraceable. Diane looked at me for a long time. She saw the pain in my eyes, but she also saw the determination. She knew her daughter. She knew what Elena was capable of. She was always so ambitious, Diane whispered. Even as a little girl, she'd take what she wanted and blame the dog. I thought she'd outgrown it. She reached into her purse and wrote down a password on a napkin. Do what you have to do, Mark. Don't let her destroy you too. I walked Diane to her car, kissed her cheek, and went straight to my office. I logged into her email. It was a goldmine. There were dozens of sent messages to an encrypted address. Attachments titled Vane_project_bribes, City_council_ledger, and Mark_setup. She had documented everything. She was keeping a black file on Vane as insurance, just in case he tried to screw her over. She had it all. The evidence of the affair, the evidence of the fraud, and the evidence of the frame job against me. I downloaded every single file. I sent them to Marcus, to Sarah, and to a secure cloud drive. I felt a strange sense of peace. The logistics were finally handled. The shipment of her lies had arrived at the port, and I was the only one with the manifest. That night, Elena came home and found me sitting in the living room with the lights off. Mark? Why are you sitting in the dark? She asked, flicking on the light. She looked beautiful, vibrant, successful, and utterly lethal. I was just thinking about Chicago, I said, my voice as cold as a grave. I was thinking about how much it costs to start a new life. Especially when your bank account is suddenly empty. The color drained from her face so fast it was like someone had pulled a plug. She lunged for her phone in her purse, but I already had it in my hand. Looking for this? I asked, holding it up. Or maybe you're looking for the $200,000 you thought was in your mother's name. It's gone, Elena. I moved it. All of it. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared at me with a hatred so pure it felt like a physical heat. You think you've won? She whispered. I'll tell the police you stole that money. I'll tell them about the LLC. I'll ruin you, Mark. I'll bury you. You can try, I said, standing up. I was taller than her, but for the first time I felt truly powerful. But before you do, you might want to check your sent folder in your mother's email. I think the IRS and the district attorney are going to find it very interesting. And I'm sure Arthur Vane will be thrilled to know you've been keeping a ledger of his bribes. She collapsed into the armchair, the sapphire silk robe pooling around her like a bruise. What do you want? She choked out. I want everything, I said. And then I want you to disappear. But not to Chicago. You're going to stay right here and face the music. The silence in the living room was absolute, broken only by the frantic, ragged breathing of the woman I had spent a decade loving. Elena looked small in that armchair, the sapphire silk robe, once a symbol of our intimacy, now looking like a costume from a play that had long since closed. You're a monster, she whispered, her eyes darting toward the door as if a miracle might walk through it. No, Elena, I said, my voice eerily calm, the logistics manager part of my brain taking full control. I'm the auditor. And your books don't balance. I sat down opposite her, placing a manila folder on the coffee table. Inside were the bank transfer receipts, the screenshots from her mother's email, and a copy of the IRS audit notice. I also placed the silver AV cufflink right on top of the pile. It caught the overhead light, gleaming like a cold, metallic eye. Here is how this is going to go, I began. You have exactly 48 hours to vacate this house. You will take your clothes, your personal electronics, and your car. That's it. You will sign a quitclaim deed to this property, waiving every cent of equity. You will sign a notarized confession regarding the identity theft and the creation of the LLC, which my lawyer will hold in escrow. If you ever, and I mean ever, attempt to sue for alimony or a share of my pension, That confession goes straight to the district attorney. She let out a sharp, hysterical laugh. And what about Vane? You think he'll let you just walk away with his money? That $200,000 you moved belongs to him, Mark. He's not a man you want to rob. That's where you're wrong, I said, leaning forward. That money doesn't belong to him anymore. It's evidence of a bribe. I've already had my lawyer, Sarah, contact a contact in the state attorney general's office. We've offered them a roadmap to Vane's kickback scheme in exchange for my total immunity regarding the LLC she set up in my name. They don't want me, Elena. I'm a boring logistics guy. They want the whale. They want Arthur Vane. The look of pure terror that crossed her face was the most honest emotion I had seen from her in years. She knew Vane. She knew that if his empire crumbled because of her black file, he wouldn't just be mad, he'd be dangerous. You're killing me, she gasped. If he finds out I kept those files. Then I suggest you start running, I said. But not to Chicago. The lease you signed? I called the building manager. I told them there was a discrepancy with the credit application, since you used my reported income to qualify for it. They flagged the unit. You have nowhere to go, Al. She began to sob then, the deep, ugly sobs of someone who had finally run out of exits. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I didn't feel the urge to comfort her. I felt nothing but a profound, hollow exhaustion. The next 48 hours were a blur of cold efficiency. I stayed at a hotel to give her space to pack, but I had Marcus monitor the house cameras. I watched her on my phone screen as she dragged suitcases to her car. I watched her pause in the kitchen looking at the spot where we used to measure our heights for fun, and then keep moving. She didn't take the dog. She didn't even say goodbye to Buster. When I returned on Sunday evening, the house was silent. The AV cufflink was gone from the table. She'd taken it, a tiny souvenir of the life she'd traded for a shadow. The fallout was swifter than I expected. With the evidence I provided, the state attorney general launched a full-scale investigation into the Green Horizon Park project. Arthur Vane was indicted 3 weeks later on charges of racketeering, bribery, and tax evasion. The consulting fees Elena had funneled were the smoking gun. Vane's lawyers tried to frame it as Elena acting alone, but the black file I'd taken from her mother's email was too detailed. It contained recorded phone calls and scan ledgers that proved Vane was the architect of the entire corruption ring. Elena didn't go to jail, but she lost everything else. Her professional license was revoked by the state board for unethical conduct and financial fraud. She disappeared from the city, moving back in with her mother in a different state, presumably to wait out the statutes of limitations and the public shame. I meanwhile had my own reckoning. The IRS audit was a nightmare that lasted 6 months. Even with my immunity agreement, I had to spend thousands on forensic accountants to untangle the mess she'd made of my identity. There were days when I sat in my quiet, half-empty house and wondered if it was worth it. I had the house, I had my dog, and I had the $200,000, which was eventually seized as part of the Vane investigation, though Sarah managed to keep a portion of it for my legal damages. But the psychological cost was a debt I couldn't just pay off. I started seeing a therapist, a blunt, older woman named Dr. Aris who didn't let me hide behind my logistics metaphors. You handled the situation like a business merger, Mark, she told me during one session. But a marriage isn't a supply chain. You're holding on to your strategic victory because you don't want to feel the grief of the loss. I didn't lose anything worth keeping, I argued. You lost your ability to trust the floor beneath your feet, she countered. That's a bigger loss than any bank account. She was right. For a long time I couldn't date. I couldn't even meet new friends without wondering what their AV was. I checked my credit score every morning like a ritual. I became obsessed with security, installing 3 different layers of encryption on my home network. I was safe, but I was living in a fortress of my own making. The final twist, the one that actually changed me, happened a year after the divorce was finalized. I was cleaning out the attic, preparing to finally sell the house. It was too big, too full of ghosts. I found a box tucked away in a corner labeled Memories, Do Not Open. I expected it to be wedding photos or old letters from Elena. Instead, I found a journal. It wasn't Elena's. It was mine from the first year we were married. I flipped through the pages. I had forgotten how much I used to dream. I wrote about wanting to start my own logistics consultancy, about traveling to Japan, about how much I loved the way Elena looked when she was sketching in the garden. As I read my own words, I realized that I had been logistics-brained long before the betrayal. I had treated our life like a project to be managed. I had been so focused on the how of our life together that I had stopped paying attention to the who. Elena was a liar and a thief, yes. But I had been a ghost long before she started seeing one. I had provided everything but myself. It didn't excuse her. It didn't make the betrayal any less monstrous. But it gave me something I didn't expect. A way forward. If I was part of the system that failed, I could change the system for the next time. I sold the house 2 months later. I didn't move to a luxury apartment or a fortress. I bought a modest cabin 2 hours outside the city, near a lake. I kept Buster, of course. One afternoon while I was out hiking, I ran into a woman named Clara. She was a photographer, struggling with a heavy tripod on a steep trail. "Need a hand?" I asked. She looked at me wary for a second, then smiled. It wasn't a masterpiece of engineering smile. It was just a tired, genuine look of relief. "Actually, yeah. This thing weighs more than my car." We walked for a while, talking about the light hitting the trees and the best spots for local coffee. I didn't ask for her LinkedIn. I didn't wonder if she had a secret LLC. I just enjoyed the conversation. When I got back to my cabin that night, I sat on the porch and looked at my phone. There were no alerts. No GPS pings. No bank notifications. Just a text from Clara with a photo she'd taken of the sunset. I realized then that I wasn't a logistics manager anymore. At least not when I was at home. I was just a man sitting on a porch with his dog. The betrayal had been a fire. It had burned down the forest of my old life, leaving nothing but ash and scorched earth. But in that ash, new things were finally starting to grow. For the first time in 10 years, the air didn't smell like vanilla or leather. It just smelled like pine trees and the coming rain. And for me, that was more than enough. I recently heard through a mutual friend that Elena is working as a clerk in a hardware store 3 states away. She lives in a small apartment and takes the bus. Arthur Vane is serving an 8-year sentence in a minimum security federal prison. Sometimes I think about sending her a copy of my final audit. I think about showing her how well I've done without her. But then I realize that even thinking about her is a logistical error, a waste of resources that could be spent on my new life. I closed the file on Elena a long time ago. I'm currently looking into starting that consultancy I dreamed about in my old journal. It's a big risk, but for the first time, I'm not afraid of the data not adding up. I've learned that you can't account for everything, and that's okay. Would you like me to help you brainstorm a plan for a fresh start in your own life, whether it's a career change or a new personal project?